guys, how's it going? It's AJ over here with Huck Media. I just wanted to update you guys on what I've been up to. You probably know me for riding dirt bikes, which I still do sometimes. I'll still be making some dirt bike videos, but I just wanted to announce that I'm branching into side-by-side racing. So I've been building this KRX here. We're getting ready for a race in October, Rage in the Sage, the 200-mile race. It's in Central Oregon outside of Bend. And then after that we have to re-prep, and I'm trying to go down and do King of the Hammers, which is one of the hardest races, hardest one-day race in the world, I should say. I've never done a type of video like this where I'm talking to the camera, but I've had lots of requests for it, so I decided I would give it a shot. And it might give me a little bit of motivation to try to get this thing done here. I was building it for a previous race, another desert race, and then I realized that I didn't have really time to start prepping it for King of the Hammers and make that race. So I took all the parts off this car, put them on my buddy's car so I could race that in a 100-mile race. We took second. It was King of the Castle. That was in the Pro NA class, but actually with our time we would have also gotten second in the Pro Unlimited class, which is pretty cool against, you know, all the big turbo cars that can do 100 miles an hour. The reason I went with the Cowie, obviously I've been in the industry for 15-20 years now. I was a mechanic at a quad shop for about 12 years, so I got a chance to drive all the cars and work on them. And as badly as I wanted to go with a Can-Am, I just know that the frame, the chassis, the front end is pretty weak. It requires a lot of structural strengthening, you know, gusseting plates, things like that. And the first time I drove a Cowie, it just felt so solid. Everything is overbuilt, everything's thick. So I thought it would be a perfect King of the Hammers car. I've been to King of the Hammers twice now, and both times I would watch some of the side-by-side racing, especially in the rock sections, and man, they just struggle out there. So I'm hoping that I can qualify decently, not be at the very back of the pack, so that I can hopefully get to some of the rock sections, you know, top 10 or 20 people, so that there's not huge bottlenecks. And then I should be able to go through the rocks pretty smoothly, and I'm really just hoping to finish, you know. Obviously you want to win or get top 5, that would be amazing, but right now it's our first big time race, so we're just focused on finishing. I gotta thank my buddy Taylor Crampton for helping me get this cage together. He also works with SafeWorker. They make these really cool standing mats that are also really good for bending down onto with your knees, especially if you're on gravel or hard cement in here like I am. They also make knee pads that go into your Carhartts, so if you're a professional in the industry or a carpenter or whatever, you can just bend down and it's padded as soon as you bend down. It's super nice. The rugged radios is a big one, some of the best communications equipment, especially for off-road racing. And then Pyrotect safety gear. Their fire suits are really comfortable. They make all different kinds of seats, steering wheels, window netting, professional fuel cells. If you're looking to get in, my wife Katie, she helps me out immensely. She helps me work on the cars. She helps me put cages on. You know, she makes food. Obviously, that's a big one. She puts up with me being gone all the time, and Committed Motorsports has been helping me a lot. Bill, he's running a really great shop here on the Oregon coast. Full Access UTV, Jake, he's a superstar, making great parts. Marcus, super great guy. I helped him build his car up and he let me race it. Into any sort of racing, I highly recommend you look at Pyrotech, especially because they're a local company out of Redmond, Oregon, I believe. ITP tires is a big one. I've always liked ITP tires. I always ran them in my quad racing days. I used to do the work series on quads as well. I did almost a full series on those. It's a softer compound of rubber, so it really grips well. And that's what I like about them. And they're also very light. Raceline wheels, they make some of the lightest, best wheels, I think, in the industry. Kingly hammers is very important to be reliable, but you also need to watch your weight because you're going through rocks, the car is constantly going up and down, and the heavier your car, the harder it is on all your drivetrain components, your frame, your A-arms, everything. It's just harder on it the more weight you have, especially spinning weight. People tend to look at tires, they tend to look at the price, they tend to look at the actual look of the tire, make sure it looks cool on their rig, obviously, and tire size. But what people don't often look at is the weight of the tire, because that's rotational mass. Some tires that are really good in the mud as well, I believe it's the Versacross V3, which I've also tried, and it did really good in the mud, trail type stuff. But it was a little heavier, so I didn't want it for desert racing. Better for slow speed stuff. If you're just going slow, a heavy tire is not a disadvantage really, because the weight can give you a little more traction to pull you up slick surfaces. But when you're going fast for a long period of time, weight is a big deal. I also want to thank Motul Oils. They brought me on their team this year without knowing a whole lot about me. And every little bit helps, so really want to shout out to them. Huck Co. obviously is my company. We do goggles and sunglasses, mostly for motocross, snowmobiling, snowboarding, mountain biking, stuff like that. The sunglasses you can use for anything, obviously. So here's a pair of Huck sunglasses. You've got comfort mode. Obviously the arms are adjustable, or you can lock them into race mode. They're quite comfortable. They're fully polarized. And they're lightweight. I love them. I think you should try them out. You can find those on www.justhuckit.com. Pinnacle Nutrition, which is, they make electrolyte pouches, they make supplements and like protein powders. Racing is also keeping your physical body healthy, because if you come into a long, grueling race not healthy, it's not going to be a good thing. You also want to make sure that you have enough protein and carbs in your system to burn while you're racing. If you don't, then you're going to run low on energy, you might lose focus, you might make a mistake, and then you're stuck out in the desert for 12 hours. Because Kingly Hammers is one of those races where if you get stuck on course, you're stuck there until the race is over. And while some of the top 10 finishers can finish the race in 4 or 5, maybe 6 hours, the people finishing last and the time cutoff is actually 12 hours. So if you start at 7, 8 in the morning, you might be out there till 7, 8 at night, even if you break on mile 10, which is not fun. That's why you have to carry survival supplies and water and stuff, maybe even your phone so you can film other racers going by, but nobody wants that. So you got to keep your body fueled up, but you also don't want to eat too much and have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the race, because that wouldn't be good either. There's no porta potties out there, in case you didn't know. Anyways, I'm going to talk a little bit about my transition from dirt bikes to side-by-sides. I hurt my body, basically. As you get older, your body can't really take jumping dirt bikes too much anymore. There wasn't really any big crash that got me out of it. It was just the constant landings. The pressure it puts on your knees, your ankles, your hips, your back, your neck. Even if you're landing good, it still can hurt unless you have a steep lip and a steep landing, into a good transition, which you usually don't get that on the dunes too often. So it's usually fifth gear, wide open, and just holding on, hoping to land it, because there might be some downhill, but it's not steep enough to where you're not bottoming out and your neck's jerking down a little bit. So I still have bikes, I still love dirt bikes, I still plan to ride them, but I wanted to continue racing and being competitive in something, so I figured it was time to switch to side-by-sides. With age comes a cage, right? I had a XP 900, the Polaris. That was a great machine. I still think it's one of the best, budget sport side-by-sides you can get. Had enough power to keep up with just about anything because it's so light, so the power to weight ratio is there. Handled like a go-kart, parts are relatively cheap for it. And then I went straight to the Kawasaki because I wanted to go NA class. In case you don't know about desert racing classes, usually the turbo class is the premier class, the highest of the high. And so there's big money in that class. you know, because they can do just about anything they want. They can replace the entire frame, they can do the full enclosure with frame rails and everything. All they have to keep is the stock suspension mounting points. You know, they can do a fully built motor, aftermarket turbos, tuning, stuff like that. Whereas the NA class is a little more budget friendly because they have restrictions. The motor has to be mostly stock, the frame mostly stock. You can add stuff to it. You are supposed to keep most of the plastic bed, front and rear fenders, and everything in front of the A-pillar has to remain stock. So that kind of creates some boundaries so that you can't spend too much money on fabrication and parts on your car. It's more of an entry level, so that's what I went for. But the race car is not the only factor when it comes to desert racing. You know, first you got to get there. So you need a big enough trailer for one car, maybe two cars if you have a pre-runner and a race car, so that you can use the pre-runner to pre-run the race course without potentially doing catastrophic damage to your race car that you can't repair before the race. So, and then you need a truck to pull that trailer, and you need to make sure the trailer, you know, has good tires and bearings under it, and the AC works, and it's got big enough water tanks to be out in the desert for a week. You know, you need a reliable truck to make sure I'm not breaking down on my 20-hour drive down to Hammers. And then you need friends or a crew, I guess, if you can afford to hire one. I can't. So I'm relying on friends to come and help me out, help me pit. There's actually about 4 different pits on the racetrack at King of the Hammers. The smaller races are usually lap races. So the 200-mile Rage in the Sage race is 50-mile laps. So we should be able to get away with just one pit to fuel, check tires, maybe get a drink of water really quick. But King of the Hammers, I think the laps are closer to 70, 80 miles, so you're not going to be able to get back to main pit on one tank of gas, typically. So someone needs to pit you at main pit, and then ideally you have people waiting at some of the remote pits with tires and fuel and tools and everything. But if you don't have enough people like I do, they're probably going to be scrambling to leave main pit as soon as I do to try to beat me to the next pit in case I need something and give me a splash of fuel. So there's really a lot of logistics that go into it. But anyways, guys, I just wanted to kind of update you on why I haven't been making dirt bike videos lately. I've been really busy working on this thing. I still have a list of 50 things to do because I'm basically starting all over. You know, I need to go back through the motor. It's got about 3,300 miles on it. I got a slight valve tick. Probably need to change my intake valves. I'd like to do a little bit of head porting potentially and just kind of go through all the bearings and stuff. There's a couple known issues with these KRXs. One is fuel delivery, which if you're not getting enough fuel, especially if you're running a hot tune, you can get cavitation in cylinder number 2. So you upgrade the fuel rail. I upgraded my fuel screen, my fuel pump. I'm running a Dynajet PV3 tuner to try to watch my AFR readings to make sure that I'm getting enough fuel. I was running a hot tune with the stock fuel system, and I did blow a motor, so I decided to do all those things and step back down to a basically stock-ish tune, and I put it on a dyno to tune it to make sure it was getting enough fuel, and even on the stock tune it was running lean. So that's something that you should check out. It might not be a problem at high elevations, but we're here at ocean sea level, you know, 0 feet, so it's getting the most amount of air possible. And if you have the motor asking for too much fuel and it can't deliver it, especially if you're doing stuff like timing advances, trying to, you know, get a little more power out of it, then you might run into issues. Because these things are notoriously underpowered. It's not the fastest NA motor for sure. The Razor's probably got it beat there. But I like the power delivery of these things, especially with the clutching. It is belt driven. It's got a normal secondary and primary clutch, but behind the secondary clutch it has a wet clutch, which is like a motorcycle style clutch. Obviously there's no clutch lever or anything, but that just helps the engagement of the secondary. So there's never a belt slap. If you're trying to climb up a rock doing rock crawling, you don't have to 2-foot it necessarily like you do in a Razor, because if you don't 2-foot, 1 foot on the brake, 1 foot on the gas, in a Razor it just jumps. It jumps and it's jumpy and it's really hard on your axles. That's why people always break axles in Razors when they're trying to rock crawl. because the way the clutch engagement is, it just wants to go, go, go. Whereas in the Cowie, you can just give it a little bit of gas and it'll just creep at 0.5 miles an hour if you want it to, and just slowly walk its way up stuff. And you can roll into the power and it comes on smooth. And then you're going back down the downside, you let off the gas and it engine brakes. So you almost don't even, because usually I have a Razor also. And in the Razor, when you're going down a hill, you need to 2-foot. You're giving a little bit of gas and you're using brake to slow down, obviously. But if you don't give it any gas, then your primary just starts free spooling. The belt is basically just free spooling. And then when you give it gas again, the primary snaps into an engagement, and then the belt tightens up all of a sudden, and that's really hard on your belt. It's hard on your clutch. It'll make the car feel like all of a sudden it's starting to slow down. So you want to ideally give it a little bit of gas downhill and then use your brake to slow down. Whereas this, you don't have to touch anything. It's just trying to slow down. So then you can decide to give it more gas if that's the ideal situation for that. I will tell you some things that happened to me when I was racing this in the King of the Castle 100-mile race. I started by rolling it, lap 2. It was kind of funny because I was coming into an off-camber rutted left-hander, and Taylor was calling me on the radio asking me where I was at because I was almost to the pit, and I go to press the steering wheel calm button, you know, to talk to him, and right as I do that, I needed to correct my steering and I flip it, and I reply to him, yeah, I'm almost to the pits, but I'm upside down at the moment. He's like, what? Upside down where? I'm like, oh, hang on. They're flipping me back over. Luckily, there was some bystanders right there that came to my rescue and flipped me back over, so thank you to whoever that was. And then the front fender was flopping in the air because it broke off of the mounts. And then I hit a rock pile on another left-hander. Maybe it was because I couldn't see that side. Maybe I was just going a little too fast. But then I blew my front right tire. And, you know, I could feel that it was blown. But I was like, let's just keep going. I didn't have a co-driver. It was just me in the car. It would have taken me a long time to change the tire. And I only had about 7 miles of course left before the finish. So I was just pushing it to the floor. I was like, come on, car, you can do it. I knew we were in a pretty good position. We were really pushing hard to catch first. So that's probably why I blew the tire. I'll include some of that footage that I have right here. And yeah, holding it to the floor with a flat tire up desert hills. It was pretty warm out. The belt started getting really hot. These have a built-in CVT temp gauge, so I knew that my belt was getting hot. And then it started flashing, and I could smell the belt, and I could see the finish line. I was like, oh man, come on, one more mile. And we made it, and we got second place. So great success for our first desert race. I think it went about as good as possible.